Quam Kahala Yahweh Bashim Yahushua Bahashim Kakodash, double honors to the apostles and other bishops of GMS, including the elders that came before them that tell it's truth. The Shalom, brothers out pushing the word of truth and in sincerity, the hopeful elect tabernacle of David. I'm the brother Yashawan, back with the WW3 Daily update. And today, the previous video, or today's video, there's the video and then there's the update. So, pretty much in the video, which is basically part one of the WW3 Daily update. So then I had to kind of look for some material to put in this update here. And after watching this guy, the voice of reason, who I like a lot, especially after his little rant that he put up right here. Let me see. Yeah, this right here, Lessons in Insanity. He does a little rant, and you get a better idea of who he is, right? And after watching this, I liked him that much more. And then I clicked on this to see what he was saying, and then found that this is
good day, everybody, and welcome to another.
That this is very important information. Okay, but before I play it, the information goes into the casualty count. You know what they're actually hiding, what they don't want you to know, which is important. Okay, but let me speak on this real quick. I believe that this, right, because this wasn't set up yesterday. Yesterday he went into the Bakhmut area and how Russia is basically closing this gap right here, which leaves nothing left for the Ukrainians, you know, wink, wink, or let's just say NATO, the EU, the whore that sits on the beast, and Ukraine, leaves them no other option but to try to approach and invade Crimea, right, which is foolhardy. So basically, this thing is going to come to an end. This is my opinion. After they completely lose Bakhmut, they're going to either be forced to go into Crimea or continue to just lose ground because the Russians aren't going to stop. Right? And all of this wasn't there yesterday. This is all, you know, he didn't report on this. So what he's going to say is something changed in the last 24 hours, and now we're looking at a cleanup effort, if you will, because they can't go down into Crimea, right? Which brings in the previous video that I just did in the Middle East. This stalemate in here, right, is going to force action in World War III to move to the Middle East, okay? Because the real battle, they can't just jump into nukes in Eastern Europe. They can't do it, right? Because that's not where the real battle is. The real battle is in the valley of Yehoshaphat, Armageddon, the last battle, right? So everything's got to be in place before, you know, nothing, they're not just going to move to tactical nukes, right? They're going to be smarter than that. Things are going to spiral out of control in the Middle East, okay? That's where the real shit is going to go down before the Celestial War starts. Let's get this Celestial War real quick, okay? Because there's two wars. There's World War III, right? And then the Celestial involved in the battle. People don't understand that, okay? Angels of God, and they're going to join. Right? Independence Day, and they're showing it. Watch the movie War of the Worlds, and they're depicting that very battle, right? So Joel 3, we'll start at 9. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty men. Let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. This is World War III. Okay? This is World War III. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. You got Hamas and Hezbollah about to be fully funded and armed, if you will, given munitions by Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. Right now, those little, Lebanon and Yemen, they're weak. But as soon as they receive, see, just like Belarus, right? The Russians took some nuclear weapons over to Belarus and said, here, we're going to put this on your border. Now Belarus is saying, hey, I'm strong. We went from no nukes to hella. I was talking about munitions. Beat your plowshare. Plowshare is a guard. A sword is a weapon of war. A pruning hook is a guard. A spear is a weapon of war. So this is talking about what? Beat your plowshares and the sword and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. Assemble yourselves and come, all ye. Something else happens. Then something celestial happens. Thither cause thy mighty ones, right? Who are the mighty ones? Those are the angels of God. After this happens, then thither cause your mighty, O Lord, God, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua, he's going to send his angels, his mighty ones, his army, fight each other in World War III. Okay? In World War III, and try to fight against the angels and the one you ignorantly call Jesus Christ, whose name is Yahushua in the Hebrew. Right? And that's just what it is. Revelation 19:19, and I saw the beast and the kings of the earth, right? And their armies gathered together to make war against who? Him that sat on the horse, and against his army. Well, who is him that sat on the horse? The rider of coming into the third, right? I saw a bunch of UFOs appear out of nowhere in the open sky, right? That's what that's saying. And behold, a white horse, a UFO is the Word of God, right? Who is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords? Who is that? Well, whoever that is, he was sitting on a white horse that came out of the fourth dimension. Okay? And what happened? And then, during World War III, he comes out of the fourth dimension, him and who else? And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, UFOs, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. Okay? So here they are fighting in World War III. They stop fighting, they come together to do what? To make war against the one you call Jesus Christ, the one in that UFO, and against those other UFOs that are called the angels. And that's just what it is. It is what it is. Okay? This fight been going on for a while. They haven't fired upon each other just yet. They're waiting for that. That's coming. Okay? Because anyway, back to the pre-war, if you will, because the scene has to change from whatever this is, right? This stalemate, this ground war, right? This has to escalate into nuclear war. Is it going to happen right here? Probably not. And how do we know that? Because it doesn't say it in the scriptures. What does it say in the scriptures? It says, God himself is going to gather the nations. I will also gather all nations and bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat, where's that at? It's in the Middle East. God said he's going to do what? Gather the armies of the world. It's called World War III. Yeah, what's going on in the Middle East? No more. We don't like you, Americans. Get the hell out of here. We're going to do trade now with Russia, China, Iran. That's what we're watching going. And if you know anything about America, ask Saddam Hussein, ask Muammar Gaddafi. If you want to trade oil and anything except for the American dollar, we're coming to bomb and strafe and bring down shock and awe on your ass. That is the American way. So what do you think is happening right now? Well, we're moving closer. This is going to kind of fall flat. How do we know this is going to fall flat? Go watch the video right before this one. Okay. It's called The Middle East Heats Up. So right now, the people that have died in the last year fighting this war here, so there's going to be mass death coming in these wars.
Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. And over the past 24 hours, there was an that apparently was released from the Pentagon by unnamed sources. It's very interesting to see what is happening now in regards to the DoD, the Western powers, the United States, now trying to clean up the results of this leak, and at the same time trying to attempt damage control. So the big issue for the leak was reported casualty rates. Now, before I talk about those casualty rates of both Ukrainian forces and Russian forces, the reason I tend to gravitate towards this leak being possibly somewhat true, being factual, is the result of over the course of the last year, the use of Russian air power, Russian cruise missiles, Russian artillery against targets throughout Ukraine. Remember, the Ukrainians, just as we're trying to analyze casualty rates, okay, do not have as much artillery as Russian forces. The Russian forces are probably firing downrange anywhere from twice to 4 times the amount of artillery that the Ukrainians are firing downrange. Now, I will say that the Ukrainians having possession of HIMARS and some other systems give them enhanced lethality and enhanced accuracy. So we can't discount that. But, again, the sheer amount of artillery, and if you look at artillery throughout the ages, artillery has caused the most casualties on opposing forces than any other instrument of war. And then again, you have to also take into account the Iskanders, the cruise missiles, the ballistic missiles, the drones that are being used against Ukrainian forces on a much more larger scale than what the Ukrainians are using against Russian forces. The Russian forces are also targeting deep within Ukrainian territory, all over Ukrainian territory. So just on those facts alone, a reasonable person analyzing the events of the war would come to the conclusion that Ukrainian casualties may be higher than Russian casualties. Now, the information that was leaked by the Pentagon stipulates that the Ukrainians may have suffered upwards to 70,000 KIA, killed in action. Not wounded in action, 70,000 killed in action. Intel believes that Russian losses were in the area of 15 to 17,000 killed in action. Still don't believe going into this conflict that the Russian 17,000 troops. And they may have lost even more than that. We just don't know at this point. But again, just based on the facts that the Russians are using a lot more artillery, they have the ability to use a very large air force against Ukrainian targets. We know now that the Russians are using and have been using 2,000-pound bombs. Again, actually, they're 3,000-pound bombs against Ukrainian targets. We've seen firsthand video evidence of Russian aircraft dropping 3,000-pound bombs on targets near Volodar. And again, cruise missile strikes throughout the country are going to lead to higher casualty rates. And we know the Russians have been targeting barracks, they've been targeting areas of troop concentrations of Ukrainian forces. So you have to wonder if this leak, again, is something that we really have to look at as being quite possibly being factual information. The Pentagon, again, is scampering to get this information back. But, once it's out there, it's out there. Once it's out on the web, it spreads like contagion. But they are trying to suppress it. They are trying to get rid of it. So it's interesting to see that. It also states in this report that the Ukrainians are building up forces for a operation, at least this report is saying that, in the vicinity of Zaporizhia, south of Zaporizhia, near Orhiv, with the possibility, again, as I've talked about before, of cutting this land bridge from Russia proper down to the Crimea. Now, it's interesting to, again, see these content providers talking about that the Ukrainians may issue an ultimatum at some point. They may try and push the line of contact, expressing a desire to have conversations with the Russians about a ceasefire. And again, I have to reiterate this. Crimea is part of the Russian Federation. The Crimean Peninsula is perceived by Russians as being part of the Russian Federation. Just like Texas is part of the United States, just like Alaska is part of the United States, obviously. So here in the United States, when you hear Ukrainians talking about, or the Ukrainian government talking about taking back the Crimean Peninsula, this area here, that would be like Russia demanding Alaska back. I know it's been a shorter period of time that the Russians have physically controlled Crimea since 2014, and then obviously they controlled it during the Soviet times. It was back in the 60s, Nikita Khrushchev, a Ukrainian, who handed over the Crimean Peninsula to Ukraine. But historically, Crimea has always been part of Russia. And more importantly, Russians perceive Crimea as being part of Russia. It's very important because then you look at the will to fight. And as I talked about before, I do not believe that the Ukrainians will ever get the Crimean Peninsula back. And again, if worse comes to worse, the Russians will use and or threaten to use tactical nuclear weapons against Ukrainian forces in order not to lose Crimea.
Stop right there. Okay. So how does this play out in the timeline, right, of the Battle of Armageddon? If if the Ukrainians and NATO and the EU fight their way down and then try to come in here, this thing escalates out of everybody's control, and they don't quite want that yet. And that's not what it says in the scriptures. The scriptures don't say that God is gathering the armies of the earth into the Crimean Peninsula. It doesn't say that. Okay. So if everything blows up and escalates, you got NATO, the EU. See, when it speaks of the beast, right? Let's go back. Okay, we're done here. Let's go here real quick. Go back to let's go back to Revelation. Go to 19. Okay, now what does this say? The beast. Who is the beast in this scenario? Okay, the beast would be the West. The beast is NATO, the EU. Okay, that's NATO and the EU is the beast. Okay, and then who is the horse that rides on top of the beast? Babylon the Great, also known as America. You see the players? Okay, so the beast and the whore, right, are not going to wind up down here fighting over this piece of land. Okay, the beast and the whore are going to wind up here. I will gather the armies of the world, right? Same armies right here. The kings of the earth and their armies gathered together. Where? Into the Middle East. Not into the Crimea. Not into Southeast Asia and Taiwan. Not into the Korean Peninsula. Right? But where? Middle East. So go back and watch that video that was made right before the Middle East heats up. All right? This is letting you know. See, it's when the Middle East heats up that we're going to see the last war. Okay? Not that nothing is going to happen here. I didn't say that. There's a war going on right here, but this ain't the last war. This is not the one to focus on. This is a diversion. Okay? This is a family dispute, if you will. All right? You think that the Ukrainians are not Russian? They're all Edomites. Trust and believe. Okay? In the Middle East, right? In Israel, you got some people that don't even belong there. Right? That's largely Ishmael, the Arabs, right? Running the whole Middle East. And really, they don't belong in the land of Israel either. But that's not the point. The point is what the book says. That God, is gathering who? The armies of the world, where? Into the Middle East. Not into the Crimean Peninsula. And while they're fighting there, okay, they're going to stop fighting each other. I got to give it. Go 13. They're going to stop fighting each other and leave the battle they have won with one another. Okay? 33. Second Ezra 13 and 33. And when all the people, that's all the armies that are fighting against each other, hear his voice, hear whose voice? The one that sat on the horse. Every man shall in their own land leave the battle they have one against another. The battle they have one against another. When Yahushua, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus, when he comes out of the fourth dimension and starts shooting off these laser beams, which is his voice, every man shall in their own land, meaning their nation, is gathering all nations, they're going to stop fighting each other in World War III. And do what? They're going to come together. They're going to be gathered together to do what? To overcome him. Overcome who? The one that sat on the horse. By fighting. Going back to Revelation 19. Okay? Back here. So that's your World War III. Your World War III is right here. And when all the people hear his voice, what voice? This voice. And whensoever the voice went out of his mouth, right? It's talking about a laser. All they burned that heard his voice. Like as the earth faileth when it feeleth. What voice do you know that could burn your ass up? Called a laser. Right? But I saw, this is 2 Ezra 13 and 10, but I saw only that he sent out of his mouth his voice. As it had been a blast of fire, that's his voice. And out of his mouth, out of his lips, a flaming breath, and out of his tongue he cast out sparks of that's it's describing the weapon systems that are on those so-called UFOs. Right? So we're going to end it right there. Right? Going back here, guess what? This is going to cool down. Why? Because the Middle East is heating up. They've done what they can do without going to tactical news. If they come down in here, it goes into tactical news. They're not ready for that yet. Okay? Because if that happens, everything spirals out of control. Did he not say that when they get down here, they're going to try to perform some sort of ceasefire? Didn't he say that? Because they know what the red line is. See this red line? All right, so with that, we hope that the elector edified you brothers very, very, very few sisters with that shalom.